Alright, what's going on everybody? So this is going to be another video pretty much similar to the one where I talked about getting into One Piece card game. This is more of a generalized topic where pretty much you're thinking about getting into trading cards in general. And I have enough experience, I could say, or knowledge I could pass on to people who want to get into trading card games. Growing up, I've always, stuck to Yu-Gi-Oh! I got into Pokemon more of a collector. I do play Pokemon, I just don't record it as much, and I don't play it as much as I do other card games like I did Yu-Gi-Oh! Later on down the line, I got introduced to Magic the Gathering, and that was my thing for a while. I did drop Yu-Gi-Oh! For a minute, came back to it, but now I'm more into the One Piece card game. As you know, I also played Dragon Ball Super before One Piece card game came out, and I also dabble in a little bit of White Shorts. As far as stuff like Digimon, Vanguard, and all that, I do plan on getting into stuff like that as well. However, I think with all the stuff I already know, with all the different card games I have played, I could pass on a little bit of wisdom. When it comes to trading card games, and if you want to get into it, well, I guess we should start as a collector, right? It's an interesting market if you're coming in as a collector. If you're looking for something like to play, then I'd say it's a pretty good thing you get into, right? Because if you're looking at card games to play, of course you're going to probably be looking at the big three, which is Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, and Magic. If you're more into like stuff that are, the, I guess, underdogs of trading card games, which would be considered like White Shorts and all that, and, all that stuff. If you're getting into it for playing purposes, then by all means go right into it. It's not hard to learn a new card game, in my opinion. It is hard for newcomers to get into like competitive standards if you're looking into playing, right? Like me, since I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh since I was young, I know how to just come back to it. I have the ability to just come back to it and understand. Unfortunately for newcomers though, with the state that Yu-Gi-Oh is in right now, you can't really just join in. You kind of just have to go through like a crash course or actually like learn how to play it. But if you're trying to get into stuff like Magic the Gathering or stuff like One Piece like I do on my channel, even Dragon Ball Super card game, stuff like that are easy to actually learn and pick up. There are actually some card games, trading card games, that are very easy to pick up and learn and to just have fun to play with. Magic the Gathering being the biggest example, especially with all the different formats it has. One of them being Commander, one of the most popular formats you can play with friends and just have a good time with. But getting into it into full detail can take a little bit longer. But there are some card games for you to pretty much just hop right in, and you'll learn along the way. However, not all of them have that. Like I said, Yu-Gi-Oh! But if you are looking to get into stuff like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon and all that, I'd say it's worth taking the time to learn, right? Especially since there's so much things you can learn by playing multiple different card games. Now, if you're looking at getting into trading card games as a collector, that's more on a difficult difficult slope than just trying to play it. And the reason why I think that is because if you're trying to become a collector or if you're trying to become a reseller, it's really hard to keep up with everything that gets released, especially if you're trying to get a whole variety of things. If you're just trying to be a Pokemon collector, you're good to go. If you're just trying to be a collector or a reseller of one thing, you're pretty much good to go. But if you're trying to do multiple things like I do, like I play all these different card games and I just want to collect all of them, it's kind of hard to keep up with everything, trying to master set everything and resell everything. It's hard to keep track of all the numbers, all the sets, all the different cards. But if you're getting into it and you just stick to one thing, it's pretty easy. But if you go to multiple things, it gets a little difficult from there. Mostly with the reselling side and knowing what you want to pull from packs and knowing what you need to resell, knowing when you have to resell it, because you don't know when the numbers are going to go down. When it comes to reselling, it kind of fits in with the playing side as well, because if you're reselling cards, most of the time you're selling it to people who actually play the game. It's a 50-50 chance. You're either selling it to a collector or you're selling it to a person who actually plays the game. So if you sell it to somebody who plays the game, you kind of want to sell it as best you can and when you need to, because that card can get banned in the game state as fast as that. And I know that because of stuff like Yu-Gi-Oh! Even though Yu-Gi-Oh's ban list updates are pretty sketchy, right? We don't if you're a Yu-Gi-Oh player, you understand what I'm getting. Where ban lists like updates and like ban list info or news is pretty much wondering if aliens are gonna visit us. Like weird like, you know, comparison, but that I don't know how else to explain it. Like the ban list news for Yu-Gi-Oh! Ever since I was young, for me to understand it, like when I was in middle school and high school, like I was always checking the ban list to know when it was updated and all that, but like nobody really knew stuff like that. So as a reseller and you're trying to get into trading card games, you kind of have to like know and feel when the right time is to resell if you're trying to get into reselling trading card game stuff, because you don't know when it's going to get banned, you don't know when it's going to become obsolete, you don't know when it's going to suck, so you don't know when something's going to crash in the market. But if you're selling as a collector, I feel like you're pretty good, because there's people trying to master set, there's hard cards to find by pulling packs, and you also make really good connections as a reseller to collectors if you're doing trading card games, because you get hookups, you get connections to like stuff you need for your shop or whatever you're trying to resell and all that stuff. The number one rule is that when you're trying to resell, or if you're trying to get into trading card games and you're trying to resell or be a collector, you got to know what your chase cards are. Now that's a term mostly used as collectors, but it's a well-known phrase against with both communities, as a player or as a collector or as a reseller. A chase card is something that you want to chase. It's in the name. It's a card that you want to pull from the pack or the set. It's the number one card you want. So an example for you wondering, if you play One Piece, the chase cards from the One Piece sets are the manga rares. The manga rares are special cards that you can very, very rarely get. And only sometimes card games release more than one chase card. Another example in One Piece was when Set 5 came out, and they released not just the manga rares, they released a special signed card of a Luffy card signed by the creator of One Piece himself. So that is another example of a chase card, and it's also an example of a set having multiple chase cards. So it's not just one singular card most of the time. By some certain chances, you are able to have a set that has multiple chase cards that either as a collector boost your collection, as a reseller help you get profit, and as a player help you flex, pretty much. So knowing what chase cards are as a collector and reseller are harder than knowing what a chase card is as a player, because most of the time chase cards aren't really used when you're playing. They're mostly there just because, oh, you pulled it and you can flex it on your friends. But as a collector and a reseller, chase cards are really hard to come by, because not only do you have to find it or pull it, you're also going to have a hard time reselling it because it's super expensive and you don't know if you have the right collector come by to pick it up off of you. So knowing what chase cards are and knowing how to sell them is actually a really hard thing to do. I myself can't say I have experience in that, because the only time I've ever pulled a chase card was all the way back when Pokemon released, I think, Crimson Invasion, and I pulled that Rainbow Charizard. That was the only time I've ever pulled a chase card ever in my life. And, I've only ever came across a chase card for the second time when I became a vendor at this local I go to, and I helped my friend get this chase card because he's actually a big collector for One Piece, the trading card game. So I helped him get the manga rare. As much as I love One Piece, the trading card game, I'm not really into the chase cards as much. The manga arts do look cool, and if I ever do pull them, of course I'm going to try to get them graded, which is another thing I will get into, or just try to collect it for purposes. I'm not going to try to go out of my way to get them, but they are really nice. Chase cards are very hard to come by, and knowing what a chase card is and how much it should go for and just seeing it out in the wild and getting it for a good price is something that's very, very hard for collectors and resellers. But again, for players, you're fine. If you're trying to get into trading card games to play and you pull a chase card, you're fine. You could keep that for yourself. You could resell it yourself as a player so you could get more money to buy more cards for your deck. So it's just like trying to get into trading card games drops into three categories, pretty much: reseller, collectors, and a player. You could either be one of the three, two of the three, or all three in together. Which is what I am. I play, collect, and I resell as best I can. But another topic I said earlier was graded cards. Now, if you're trying to get into trading card games as a collector and a reseller, graded cards are mostly where your money goes to. Mostly because collecting is a big part of cards. It's always been that way since baseball cards came out, all the way back in the good old days of black and white TV and the Great Depression. Um, trading cards have always been a thing to collectors ever since that. So like trying to get something for your collection and you see it out in the wild and it's graded makes it more of a collector's piece in your collection, in my opinion, than anything else you have. Because not only is it a hard card to find, it's one of the best cards in the set to grab as a collector or slash reseller. It's also something that was graded and looked upon by, professionals and authorizers or whatever they're called to pretty much say, hey, your card's pretty good condition. It's worth this much now. So graded cards are something that you should probably put your money into if you're trying to get into it. Only recently I'm starting to get into graded cards. I actually sold my last graded card at the last time I was a vendor at the local I went to. My local has a special event every month that lets you become a vendor and sell some stuff. I was able to sell a Mint 10 graded Winged Dragon of Ra from Yu-Gi-Oh! Of course I had that because I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh! Player, or I used to be. I still play Yu-Gi-Oh! But I'm not as much anymore. But I had a graded 10 Winged Dragon of Ra, and I sold that for more than it was asking for. The Winged Dragon of Ra, the version that card was, didn't go for much, but because it was a graded 10, it went up by quite a bit. Like a dollar, like a 50 cent to a dollar card went up to like $20. So that's not bad. An example like that is like mostly why, if you're trying to become a reseller, you want to try to get graded cards. Same thing for collectors purposes too. If you're trying to become a collector, graded cards, you could dabble in a bit to spice up your collection, make it look nice, make it look cooler. And just to let you know, it will cost a pretty penny, because not only do you need the cards to send in to get graded, you also have to pay them to get graded, which is fair. But it's a pretty pricey like area to step in if you're trying to get into the field. So pretty much, it still, as a collector and reseller, it all relates down how to sell it, when to sell it, and knowing when to sell it. Like knowing the exact time to sell it, because again, you don't know when something's going to crash in the market, you don't know when something's going to get banned. And as a player, to sum it up, as a player, you're pretty much fine if you're trying to get into a trading card game. Because everything's a learning process. Most learning processes are harder than others. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is harder to learn because of all the paragraphs it has, all the stupid chaining it has. To Magic, where Magic is just a great fun time. That's if you play Commander, by the way. If you play Standard in Magic, hey, by all means, if you feel like you want to get into Standard for Magic, go at it. I left Standard for a reason. Standard may not be my thing, but it could be your thing for most card games. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Standard format is just your normal way of playing the card game. Most card games have different formats. Standard is the most common one, where you just play it normally. For Magic, I switched over to Commander. Easier, super fun time, especially with friends for Magic the Gathering. Yu-Gi-Oh! In my opinion, Tag Duel is the best format. For Pokemon, I think my best format, in my opinion, is probably when the EXs came back. And for One Piece only has one format. Technically, we have two. It's called the Buddy Battle, but nobody really plays that. We only really have one format for Magic, One Piece. So to sum it all up, to repeat myself again, to sum it all up and to end the video, if you're trying to get into trading card games, as a player, you're pretty set and good to go, especially if you have friends to help you along the way. Again, everything is a learning process, some harder than others. If you're trying to get into trading card games as a collector / reseller, it is a little bit difficult, knowing what sets you need to buy, knowing what cards you need to pull from sets, knowing what the chase cards are from the sets, knowing if something graded will be worth it, and knowing when something's going to crash in the market, or knowing how hard that card's going to be to get normally. So that's pretty much to sum it up. I know this seems like a random video just to post, but it is a good topic to talk about since this channel is all about trading card games. Hopefully what I was talking about made sense. I just talked about pretty much my experience with card games and how I've seen it being all three of these topics: a collector, reseller, and a player. So hopefully my wisdom somewhat made sense. Of course, my opinions won't match others. Some people won't agree with the opinions I just said. Maybe some even think I'm just talking out of my ass. Maybe. Just maybe. But hopefully this video was somewhat of a helpful video of understanding how trading card games kind of work pretty much.